Welcome to the Acquirable Podcast. We're at the ACG event, and we're having an incredible time talking to founders and industry leaders and exploring best practices all around in the space. And I am really excited to talk to you guys. We got a chance to meet last night, and we have some shared history and synergy in the works that we've done, or the experiences at least that we've had. So introduce yourself, and then we're going to dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, thanks for having us. Great to be here. Great to be out of the cold north and down in LA for a week. So I'm Hugo Hodgett. I'm the CEO of H2 Analytics. We're a company that operates out of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And we are working on live virtual and constructed simulation, primarily for intelligence in the military and training space.
Very good.
So Gabriel Sirois, I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the company. I'm the reformed venture capitalist who joined the team. And so they needed somebody who understood the space but didn't necessarily have the scar tissue yet. So I'm joining the fold and learning how fun it is and how painful it is at the same time.
Let's talk about, folks that watch our podcast are usually 2 to 3 years out from wanting to sell their business. And they're wondering about that process of selling a business, but also folks that are going, man, what's it like to start and run a business? And you guys have now been branded by fire on starting and running a business. So pull back the layer a little bit and just share with us a little bit about what the experience has been like starting your own company.
Yeah, so look, I think on a personal level, it's you can't ask for a better opportunity to really test your strengths and test yourself and understand a little bit more about what you're capable of. And all that is to say is that it's really hard, right? It's really hard. And the skills and the qualities that you need in order to do it, are not, they're not obvious to everybody. And so it's super important for anybody that's looking into that space to be into to have a mindset going in about you need to be the most critical of yourself. You need to be the one that is driving, and you need to be the one that can make those decisions and act accordingly. And if you're not in that space, maybe it's not right for you. Yeah. What I'd say is that, my experience has really been one of, if you're looking to start a company or run a company, so we are a bootstrapped Canadian defense tech company, which to most people that know that space is just masochism, right?
Sure. Yeah,
and so I would say that the kind of key thing that I would recommend to people as they think and work through those steps of do they want to get into it is really, be in a position where you as the founder, as the CEO, your executive team, be prepared to reinvent yourselves every couple of years, right? Because at every stage, you're going to be tackling different problems. You need to be able to learn quickly. You need to be able to deploy that learning super fast in order to be able to have the outcomes that you want. And so regardless of how hard or easy it is, I would just say be in a position where agility and flexibility are probably the most important things. Yeah.
And how about you, as you've gone from your former life to your present life, what are some things that have been shocking to you, and what are some things that have been transferable to you?
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm actually coming in to do the tail end of what you're talking about, right? Which is actually get the business ready for that next phase, whether that be to take capital in, think about the exits. And so, the reality though is that I realized that I was really hard when I was doing diligence on the other side.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, and the reality of that is that you need to prepare for diligence, you need to work through that, but you need to run a business at the same time.
Right.
And so you're doing all those critical decision points, you're context switching every day, because one day I'm coming in doing a financial model and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you need to look at this distributor agreement.
Right.
And start talking about the points and the IP strategy around it. So
And that's the morning.
Right?
Exactly. That's the morning. That's
it's
not
still
even
in
a
the
day.
AM.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of the stuff is transferable, right? Because the reality is the business community is a business community.
Right.
We talk the same language, it's the same lived experiences, and there's some pattern recognition to transacting as well.
Right.
And so I think I'm bringing that flavor to the business, which is preparing ourselves so that we can be investor ready.
Exactly. I love that. It's funny. I tell this story on and off, but my wife came to me not long ago and said, hey, I think our son's dyslexic. And I said, oh, he's not dyslexic. He's just creative and imaginative like me. And she began to describe over and over, evenings, what dyslexia is. And all of a sudden I realized, damn, I'm dyslexic. I totally am. But one of the strengths of being dyslexic is context shifting. the way that your brain is wired is it's not like these two left brain, right brain. It's this constant weave of the way your brain functions. And probably one of the strengths that I had, you asked me last night, like, why would you do a startup more than once? Like once lived is plenty. The strength of being able to shift context quickly, digest information, pattern recognition, things like that allow, I think, any business to thrive, because it is true. I mean, at the end of the day, find a niche, sell something for more than it costs you to do, and find customer acquisition. I mean, just patterns, right, at the end of the day. And then the big thing is being ready for, taking on capital, a liquidity event, whatever it might be. Talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, the complexity is not in the business, right? Like a lot of what we do on a day-to-day is actually not rocket science.
Right.
Like we're not SpaceX to any extent. But the complexity actually lies in the fact that you've got so many different parts of the business to manage at the same time.
Right.
You've got personalities that you need to manage. You need to manage the incentive alignment amongst the team, the management team, the possible investor base, so that everybody's really driving towards the same mission.
Yeah.
And the challenge when you're looking at the investor side is being able to articulate that, but then show it in the results too.
Yeah.
And that really just means that you need to do the hard stuff, which is roll up your sleeves and do the, if that means picking up the mop and cleaning the aisles, because that's what's required, that it gets done, irrespective of, where you kind of sit in the totem pole.
Let me ask you guys this question. You're 7 years in, is that what you said last night? 7 years in. What, and share as much as you want to share or don't share, but what do you think makes your company or a company, if you want to speak agnostically about it, investor ready? And what do you think are some of those like, oh man, that's got to get fixed? So this is kind of like, man, we're investor ready when, and this is stuff that you were going, whoa, these are some of the hard things to fix to get investor ready.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're super lucky because basically the entire team comes from a military background. So we are very accustomed to things like triggers and conditions and sequencing and planning and all of those kind of things, right? So from an investor ready standpoint, I would say just the fundamentals of the business are super strong, right? And we can demonstrate that. We can demonstrate that pattern over time. We can show the growth. We can articulate where that growth has come from and will continue to come from.
Right there,
and then what is the kind of expansion that we can do with that. We have an intuitive sense of where the technology could go and what that allows us to do and what new markets that can access. I'd say from my perspective, from the preparedness side, it's, from my side, it's a lot about understanding that you don't know what you don't know. And, that's why Gab's here, right? And so from, one of the key reasons that we brought on somebody like Gab is that he can sit across the table from an investor, talk to them in their language, articulate the problem, and still has that subject matter expertise that he understands what problem is solving. And so from a preparedness perspective, I almost see that as an investor can sit across from me and, they can pull a fast one on me. Sure. But they can't on him. Right. And so from their perspective, I think that's both a threat and an opportunity where they're dealing with somebody who can transact at their level. And that's a huge capability for the company.
Maybe to answer your question, it's one of the best lines I think I heard is that, businesses are not sold, they are bought. Right. And so what that means is that you need to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Right. And so running the business is the marathon, the fundraise, the exit, that's the sprint. Right? So those are like the last miles that count. But you can't be doing the work at that time. Right? Like you need to be hitting the gym beforehand 100%. So that when it's time to do the race, you're ready to go. And so, I think what I've found as I've been in the business, the hard piece is it's like a house, right? Like a house always has work and always has things that could be renoed and improved on, and that list never ends. So really what it's about is actually focusing on the ones that are going to be important for the investors. Right? And that's really not the glamorous things, right?
So
it's
let's
not the pretty
double tap on that for us. What in your opinion, what are the important parts of the house that need to be in order for investors to go, we want to buy this house?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, everybody's going to be evaluating it based off of the financial metrics, right? So you have to have trust and consistency in those financial metrics, right? And so that's things like, hey, if you don't have audits, you're moving to a reviewed engagement. If you're getting to the size where, it's big dollars, now you're going from review to, an actual audit process. Are you doing the QOV beforehand because you want that sprint to be as short as possible? Or, have you identified that your targets are probably just going to do it themselves so you can just prepare without having to go through the full slide. the other one too, and we're on the software side, right? Like that's making sure that the IP strategy is in place. We understand all that context as well. Because what you don't want is you don't want the investors coming in asking questions and you're like, hand bombing the stuff.
Exactly.
ChatGPT, what's
what
open
would you say
source,
to
right?
an investor that said this?
Yeah, exactly.
Send them a bunch of hallucinated documents that make no sense,
Yeah.
right? And so like you got to make sure that everything's coherent, which means that you need to do it ahead of time. So it's really kind of the unglamorous stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I'd say that a lot of it too is getting the things that live in the founder, the C-suite, and kind of that VP level, getting the stuff that's in their minds down on paper, right? So that it can be, somebody else can look at that and understand it and be able to articulate why it is that maps with everybody's vision.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're, like, if you don't have a growth strategy down on paper that somebody can read through and understand and feel and see themselves as part of that, it's so much harder.
Yeah.
It's so much harder.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. It's funny when we work with a lot of companies to sell them, it's amazing how often the founders have got to the place where they're done being imaginative, they're done being visionary, they're done being strategic, and they're just ready to get out. And the challenge with that is when you sit with a buyer and the buyer goes, "This is great. Where is it going? If we stress the business with capital or add-ons, where's this thing going?" And they're like, "Man, I don't know, you figure it out." Well, no, like you've got to have that domain knowledge up until the very end of where the market's going, where the product's going, where the opportunities are going. It doesn't mean you're going to take it there necessarily if you're at a full exit stage, but you got to know.
I think what's important there is you really do have to identify what your target investor or buyer base is, right? Because they're all going to have different motivations. So like, let's be clear. Like I'm in the CFO seat and I totally get it. Like if we go to a strategic at some point in time, I am out of a job, right? Like that's fine. Like that's just kind of the natural progression of things. But like if you're selling to a private equity sponsor or a venture capitalist, you're totally right. Like they are expecting that you're running the business or they're going to help you through that transition phase, right? But you still need to be able to articulate it. You need to be honest with yourself and then honest with them on the other side too.
Yeah, and I think that honesty with yourself thing is really critical, right? Like you need to understand that it's the golden rule of it's their gold, it's their rules, and especially in that kind of PE space, or it's certainly in a strategic space. And so kind of getting used to the idea that, while as a founder, especially in our case, we're entirely bootstrapped. So we have no external decision centers. That getting into that kind of realization and digesting that early that, you're working for somebody again. Right?
Yeah.
Or maybe for the first time in your career, you're actually working for somebody. Yeah. And so being kind of ready for yourself to understand that flexibility, that agility, that's gonna decrease, and whether or not that's actually worth the trade-off.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's a very different motion to all of a sudden be accountable to somebody else's, and it is their goal, their rule. Let's take a quick pivot here and just talk to founders a little bit, and even people that dream about, man, if I could get my business to a place where people wanted to, acquire either some or all of my company, how amazing that must be. But my guess is the last 7 years haven't all been easy.
Not being easy is a nice understatement. So it has been an absolute journey. And so the background context is that, Canada has been absolutely neglectful in its defense spending for the last 30 years. And so this kind of recent uptick in defense spending to get to 2% and then eventually 5% by 2030 has resulted in a ton of opportunities and more flexibility to work within the system. But the reality is that the last 7 years have been really, trying to get blood from a stone. Yeah. Now that's kind of more of the kind of market conditions more broadly. I think that the thing that would interest your listeners a little bit more is like, what are some of the trend lines there, right? That you would see across industries, and it's really like you're just going to be buffeted by so many factors that are outside of your control, and you just need to be in a position where you can, take your deep breaths. Right. Have your little freak out, and then get back into the seat and make decisions and execute on things. And, I know that there's lots of discussion in the community and especially in the defense tech community, kind of tongue in cheek about having wartime CEOs versus peacetime CEOs, right?
Yep.
And it's fascinating to see that, you know, the people that I really love to work with are really those wartime CEOs, right? They're really the guys and gals that can look at a problem and say, like, I can act and I'm going to act, and that kind of understand that that action is just better than inaction. So as a trend line, right, regardless of how hard it gets, it's kind of like you need to be able to bounce back quickly, work through problems, and also have a great support network. Right.
What's been the hardest part for you as a founder CEO? Like pull back that curtain a little bit. What you shared a little bit about a photo that you took, and I think it was your wedding photo or engagement photo or something.
Yeah. So during I got married in 2021, and we were at such a stressful point in the business, you know, just bouncing from payroll to payroll, and, you know, one late accounts receivable coming in meant that, you know, Hugo was eating Mr. Noodles for a week, and so just part of my mustache turned white. Right.
Just from the stress. And so all of my wedding photos, it just looks like I screwed up shaving that morning, and I took a chunk out of my mustache, and then it came back. Right. And, you know, so the stress is never going to stop. And what I would say is that it doesn't get easier, but it does suck less. Right. And do you think that's, I may have mentioned this story last night, but we had started, it was my third company, and we'd raised a bunch of capital, and it was a COVID product, and it was just up and to the right. We went from 3 of us to 130 something employees in 14 months. It was absolute chaos. And we had finished this big project, and the client said back to me, "Went amazing, so happy with the way it went. We hope we never have to use you again." Because the product was serving, you know, everybody not going to conferences, not showing up in person. And I remember when they said that, I knew we were hosed. I mean, we had just raised $16 million, hired all these people, signing contracts left and right, but you're like, it's over. And what are we going to do to pivot out of this when this thing shrinks? And those moments were like that you have to stay in that fight and not go, I'm going to just turn a blind eye to that. I didn't hear that. And I think in business, customers, the market, and your gut are going to tell you a lot of things, and you get the choice to listen and act or ignore, and ultimately the monster on the bed's going to come out. So I think, tell me about like what, in those stressful times, was it trying to close new deals? Was it, man, we're investing more in the product than we are like capital coming in, or like what was kind of going on for you?
Yeah. So it's a bit of an artifact of the industry, but a lot of times it's just the bureaucracy could not action the speed at which that makes sense for a company, let alone a startup, let alone one that is kind of bootstrapping,
self-funded,
right? And so we were in positions where, you know, you're trying to get a system that is designed to move slowly, to move faster. And those were probably the most stressful times. And the other really difficult times were less around you know, that kind of, are we running out of money? Those kind of problems. They were around, you know, if we're looking at say a business line or a product line, right? You know, you as the founder have to be in a position where, like, yes, you can make decisions and you can go to war and you can do all of those kind of things, but there is a point where you say, okay, in some battles I need to retreat. Right. I need to pull back. And so even if you're in a position where, you know, things are going great, you still need to look at the fundamentals of each of those kind of product lines or service offerings or what they are, and say, maybe this just isn't working. Maybe it's just not worth it. And maybe that's something that I need to shut off. And especially if you're a small business, that gets really difficult because, you know, those are your people. Right. And you're saying, well, I'm going to shut down your line and I don't know if I can employ you somewhere else. So that's where it gets hard.
When we were we had built a virtual technology company, And we had came out of a community base, so learning, certifications, community, all this kind of stuff. And I remember this day where I knew I needed to shut down the virtual tech builds and put all the resources into the community side of reimagining learning CEs, but with virtual components. But I remember a day, it was the hardest day I ever had, decision I had to make as a CEO. I needed 3 months of all my virtual people to finish all the commitments to our current clients because we were under contract to finish these deals. And I knew that in 3 months I was going to let all those people go. But I also knew in 3 months I needed them working 10-hour days. And that like weird ethical moral tension of like, I need to really maximize these dozen virtual developers to really push for me for 90 days. And on day 91, I'm going to let them go. And trying to manage that, or else everything sinks. Because or else we're not funded here to fund this. And some of those moments when you're like, there's no school to prepare for that. There's no emotion to prepare for that. You're just like, it's wild.
It's funny you say that because I remember like I was on the other side of the fence being like, at the board, having to talk these things through. And like, I'm a degree removed, right? So I'm not like as emotionally tied to it, but I still remember sitting there being like, my education did not prepare me for this conversation about we need to do a riff and like, why it's important. Because it's really the survival of the business. Yeah. And like as hard as it is, it was like, we have to let a percentage of the team go, but it's the only way we're going to keep the rest of them to keep going. And I don't want to, take Hugo asunder. I think we're pretty fortunate in the business that we're in too, because the market that we serve really is kind of mission and purpose. Yeah. And like we're here at the ACG, Aerospace and Defense event. So every business here is kind of got that same mission alignment. Right. But I think that the people we bring on really believe in it too. Yeah. So like I wouldn't say that we're sitting there needing to kind of crack the whip to the horse, right? Sure. Like I think the carrot is already kind of innate in the people that we bring in or who want to come work with us.
Sure.
Yeah, and making sure that the growth that would require us to make some really hard decisions is very disciplined. Yeah, right. Absolutely. So be much more disciplined on the growth side. Yeah. So that you don't have to be ruthless on the other side. Yep. Right? Exactly. So that's been a huge, and that's just kind of in the DNA of the business, and whether or not we take capital or what that looks like, right? It's going to continue, and I think that that's something that we're pretty proud of so far, maintaining it.
Let's finish with this question for both of you. Everything you've learned through the last 7 years, and how long have you been on the team?
It's like 6 months now. So
okay.
I'm the FNG, right?
He's been floating around for a few years.
Yeah, now. Okay. Yeah. So you've been around for one thing that you would do again. It was just a great decision, a great choice, a great leadership move. One thing you would do differently.
So what I would do again was reading some of the strategic tea leaves. Like we were really getting ready to go to market probably a year and a half ago to do a capital raise, right? And reading some of the strategic tea leaves about where the world was going and what was happening, and saying like, I'm just gonna wait a little longer, right? Like let's give it 8 months. And sure enough, new government, total change of pace. World continues to deteriorate. That's not great, but
you read the tea leaf,
That's right. And then to go from there, has paid huge figurative and literal dividends, right? And so that has been great. One thing that I would do differently is I would be much more aggressive in my decision making around HR, right? And really, that is, especially when you're a new company or a startup, right? Everybody's really close. You're working together, but you as the CEO, you need to be sitting there and saying like, is this the right person for the job, right? You can let those decisions fester for months, if not years, right? And so getting onto that early and saying like, you know what, I think this position has actually outgrown you. Yeah. And I think it's time for somebody else to come in, would have saved a ton of heartache down the line. Right. Good. Yeah. Good.
It's super interesting. Like on my side, and I think the company did it, right? But it is that patience, right? And it's funny. I remember working with this company, and we had a CEO there, and he said, and it was just, his business is a banger, IPO, chairman of the board for years after. But the line he used is that it was a 15-year overnight success.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think people get caught up, especially when the business is growing, you get caught up in the growth rate, and it's like, let's just chase that at all costs.
Yeah.
Right. But it's, make sure that you're choosing two-way doors and you're not locking yourself into one-way door decisions.
Yeah.
Look, for me, honestly, if I had to do anything differently, I just wish I joined the business earlier.
Yeah.
As you saying, I was kind of hanging around the hoop for
Yeah,
a long
yeah,
time.
yeah.
I was working in the PE side.
Yeah.
The fat salary is getting comfortable, but
Yep.
like it's way more exciting on this side of the
It
fence. It's rewarding, being part of the actual building of the business.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is that it takes time to learn the business, and this is those things that like I kind of learned afterwards. Is like I think Hugo and the rest of the team just have this like almost spider sense where like they don't need to see the numbers, but by like what the email threads are, what's happening in the day to day, like they get the ebbs and flows, and that just takes time to come. And so I wish I'd just jumped on board earlier, because I think the uptake has been drinking through a fire hose, and it's not going to stop. But I think it would have been nice to just get at it earlier.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, guys, from one founder to another, and startup guys to another, there's nothing more. And I've done a lot of things in this world. There's nothing more beautiful and amazing than traveling through this life, creating something. It just isn't. I've been on all the sides, and creating something out of nothing, creating value that didn't exist before, learning how to make that more valuable and more true and helpful for other people. Gosh, man, for me, it's just in my blood, I guess, but I don't think there's anything better. So I'm proud of you guys for the work that you've done. And I can't wait to just see your story and see what happens, and champion and cheerlead you along, and just watch the story.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thanks.
and thanks for having us. And for anyone listening, I just want you to know, I know I bemoaned a lot last night the fact of like I can only do this once. I'm not sure. I think it's in me now. I think
I ran my first half marathon and years ago, and the guy said, the second you get across the finish line, you'll have one of two thoughts. I'm glad I did it. I'm never doing it again. When's the next one?
Yeah.
And when I finished that first half marathon, I said, when's the next one? And I think when it's in your blood, you're built to hunt and build, and this is who you are. So I know you're definitely doing another one.
Don't tell my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell my wife. Yeah.
Guys, thanks for the time.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Appreciate it.